Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back to my YouTube channel, Mobile Forms Guru. So in this video today we're going to look at the calculate question type, the calculation attribute, and also formulas in XLSForm. So calculate is a question type in itself, just like you have text, you have select one, select multiple, among other question types. But there's also a corresponding calculation attribute where you write your formulas and it evaluates and then stores the answer into that question. And then to do that, of course, you need some operations and attributes. So that's where you have your calculation. You have formulas where you're able to perform those calculations. And formulas could be applied in multiple places. From a previous video, you've seen how we applied functions and also we applied formulas to constraint and constraint message, and we're going to see other applications of formula. So for formula, you're able to apply it for constraint, for relevant, for calculation, for trigger, for default, and for required. We're going to explore a few of them on this video. So let's jump right into it. So to begin with, we're going to have a calculate question, but I'm going to add one more question to do that. So at the end of the day, what we want to do is for this tutorial, we'd want to calculate the body mass index, the BMI of the respondent or whoever's information has been collected. And so to calculate BMI, we need the weight and height of a person, either the weight in kilogram and the height in meters, or the weight in grams and the height in centimeters. So we already have a question for height. So in that case, we're going to ask for the person's weight. So we're going to ask the question, which is also going to be a decimal, since we're asking the questions in the option in kilogram. So it's going to be weight kg. So the question would be, what is your weight in kg? So this is the next question we've added. We're now asking for the person's for the respondent's weight. Before I forget, we're going to reverse what we did in the last video. So in the last video, we used this to explain trace filter. So I'm going to make this my main sheet so I don't forget. So I'm going to rename this first to something. Let's say I'm going to give it survey_1, and then I'm going to rename this to survey. So as I mentioned in the last video, when you're using XLSForm to validate, it only looks for survey, choices, and settings. Anything else is discarded. So survey1 and other tabs here that we have are not going to be considered. So I'm taking this back to survey. So now the next question I want to ask is BMI. Now I know the BMI formula is the person's weight in kg divided by the square of their height in meters. So I'm going to add a question here, a calculate question. So this is going to be calculate. I'm going to select the calculate question, and the option is going to be BMI. So now a calculate question doesn't require a label. It doesn't require a label, and it's very advisable not to use a label for a calculate question. If you go through the documentation, one of the reasons you don't do that is you risk the option the user imputes to be replaced with the actual calculation you made. And so there is a way to display the answer to the user without them changing the answer you stored in that question. So we're going to leave it without a label, and we're going to come back to display it in a bit. So to calculate the BMI, we're going to go to calculate function. So the calculate question works with the calculation calculation attribute. So I'm going to add a calculation here. So our BMI is going to be the height, sorry, the weight. So in that case, our BMI would be weight. So our question for weight is this. So I'm going to copy it here, and as I said, this is how we reference a question. So we're going to write the $, the curly bracket, and then we paste it, So our weight in kilogram divided by. So on the screen you'd see the operations for, or the operators for XLSForm. Everything is similar with most of the operations you would perform, except for division. Division is written as div instead of a forward slash. So this is the operation for division. So we're going to write divide by. Then we want to divide it by the square of the height. So I'm going to put it in a bracket since I want to square everything. So it's going to be weight. It's going to be height times height. So I'm going to copy the height. $, a curly bracket. So this is the formula for BMI. Our BMI is the weight multiplied by the weight divided by the height squared, and that's our BMI. So doing this will calculate the BMI for the question immediately. Once we come here, it's going to use these two options provided and calculate the BMI, then store it under this question. So let's go ahead and validate our form and see what happens. So I'm going to provide the height in meters, 1.5, and then the weight in kg. So let's see, 30. But then we don't see the BMI. That's because the BMI is a calculate question type, and the calculate question type doesn't appear, especially since it doesn't have a label, and it also doesn't have a hint. So now what we will do is we would want to display the BMI to the user. So this saves in hopefully down once we upload our XLSForm and deploy it on ODK Collect, and as we begin collecting data, you'll see how it disappears. But to display it to the user, what we will do now is create a question. So one of the question types we have is a note. So note is a question type that doesn't take any input. It's whatever is in the label would just display, but it's not going to take any entry. So this would going to be, I'm just going to write this BMI display. So this question would display the BMI of the user. So I'm going to write your body mass index is, and then I'm going to make reference to the BMI question, which is BMI. So it's going to take in the input of the BMI and display it to the user. So I'm going to save this, then validate our form. So now you're going to see a question that says your body mass index is not a number because I haven't imputed anything. So I'm going to go ahead and impute the options for the height. Let's say 1.5, and then for the weight we're going to say 30. And so once we do that, it calculates the BMI and then displays it. So the question responsible for calculating the BMI is actually the calculate question we had. This displays the BMI to the user. So now once we collect our data, that question that says BMI is going to come with the BMI. But this question is only responsible for displaying it. So that's how you're able to use calculate in conjunction with the calculation attribute to perform calculations. So as you can see here, you can perform complex calculations. ODK has a documentation on how you're able to use a wide range of calculation for your calculate question type and other question types. And so you're able to achieve a lot of things. So as opposed to asking the user to calculate their BMI, which they might not have the, might not have time or might not have the calculator or things to do that, you just do that within your XLSForm. You just take in the ingredients you need, and then you cook in the final data you require. And so this is the body mass index of the person based on the entry they've provided for their height and weight. And now another thing I'm going to do here is with formulas, right? So as I specified earlier, you're able to use you're able to use formulas with constraint, relevant, calculation, and also trigger. So now we've already used a formula with constraint, because this is basically a formula, because it's saying it's evaluating one thing and another, and then based on what it evaluates to, it shows the constraint message. So this has to evaluate to true before the question is submitted. If this evaluates to false, it displays the constraint message and doesn't submit the XLS form. And the same thing with this relevant. So this is relevant. So only when this evaluates to true does it show ethnic group. So unless the user selects NG as part of as their option, then the ethnic group is not going to appear. So this is how function is used for. This is a formula used for relevant and also for constraint, and now we've used it for calculation also. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a formula for required. And required, as I've written here, you can either use yes or true. So if you have a formula in any of these, it evaluates to either true or false, and it only works if it evaluates to true. So I don't have to write true or false here. What I could do here is write a formula that is going to be checked, and if it evaluates to true, then this is made required, and if it evaluates to false, then this question doesn't need to be answered. So I'm going to do a very basic one here. So I'm going to add a question. I'm going to add a question here that asks, so it's going to be a yes or no question. So it's going to be a select one, and I'm going to give it yes or no. It's going to be y. I'm going to label my yes or no as yn, and then it's going to have, the question would be 3 names. That would be my question. I would want to ask the user if they have 3 names. So I'm going to ask, do you use 3 names? Right? So this would inform whether or not I would ask for a middle name or not. And so I'm going to put this under relevant and also put it under required, respectively, but first of all, I'm going to use the relevant. So it's going to be relevant only if this evaluates to true. So I'm going to say relevant. So let's specify our choices first. So we have y underscore n. I'm going to use 1 for yes and 0 for no. So this would be yes, this would be no. And these are my options. And so what I would say here is, for relevant, I would say this is only relevant if the user selects yes, right? Selects yes for the question, do they have 3 names? So I'm going to write 1, because 1 is what represents my yes. So I'm going to save this. Let's close this XLS form and validate. The question for middle name doesn't appear, but once I select, do you use 3 names, and I select yes, then it appears. If I select no, it doesn't appear. But still, at that, it's not required. A user could choose not to answer that question, and the formula would the form would still evaluate. So I'm going to select a date of birth, select country. With height, I'm going to write 1.0, and I'm going to validate. Height in meters. So 1. And so the form is still valid even without imputing my middle name, despite the fact that the user answered yes to having 3 names. So to do that, what I will do is now specify this option for relevant under required. So I'm going to take it out and put it here instead. And so we've used formula with relevant, and now we're going to use it with required. So let's save this. So now let's ask the user whether they have 3 names or not. So as you can see, the option for required changes based on the option. So now if I ask, do you use 3 names, and the option is yes, then the user has to impute a middle name before they're able to submit the form. And if they select no, then the user doesn't need to answer, whether they doesn't need to fill in a middle name before they're able to answer the question. And so that's how you're able to use formulas in your XLS form. So we've seen how you can apply formulas with constraint, how you apply formulas with relevant, here how you able to apply formula with required, and also apply formulas on calculation. There are much more complex formulas you can use. I would add the documentation. I would add the ODK documentation for formula in the description of this video, under the documentation where you can see how you're able to apply multiple operations. So check out the documentation. Leave a comment on which one you found very interesting, or which one you would like to see how it works. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching.